Hello, brilliant student. Welcome to Topic 4 of your CRS exam preparation series. Today we are discussing the supremacy of God. This topic appears in your exams every single year. In this lesson, you will learn the meaning of God's supremacy, the story of Elijah at Mount Carmel, the challenge between God and Baal, and how to answer exam questions. Let us begin. First, what does the supremacy of God mean? Supremacy means being the highest in rank, power, and authority. When we say God is supreme, we mean there is no one above him. There is no one equal to him. There is no one who can challenge him. All other so-called gods are false. They have no real power. They cannot hear prayers. They cannot send rain. They cannot save anyone. Only the God of Israel is supreme. This is a very important topic in your exams. Examiners love to ask questions about Elijah's challenge to the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. To understand this topic, you need to know the background. King Ahab was the king of Israel. He was one of the worst kings in Israel's history. The Bible says that Ahab did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any king before him. He married a woman named Jezebel. Jezebel was a Phoenician princess who worshipped the false god Baal. Ahab built a temple for Baal in Samaria. He also set up an Asherah pole. He did more to provoke the Lord than all the kings of Israel before him. Jezebel killed many prophets of the Lord. She brought 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah to eat at her table. The worship of Baal had become the official religion of Israel. God raised up the prophet Elijah to confront Ahab and Jezebel. Elijah was a fiery prophet. He was not afraid to speak truth to power. Elijah went to Ahab and said, "As the Lord lives, the God of Israel before whom I stand, there will be no dew or rain in the next few years, except at my word." Then Elijah left. He went to the brook Cherith, where ravens fed him. Then he went to Zarephath, where a widow fed him. For 3.5 years, there was no rain in Israel. The drought was severe. People were suffering. Finally, God told Elijah to go and present himself to Ahab. The rain would come again. Ahab and his servant Obadiah went looking for grass to keep the animals alive. Obadiah was a faithful servant of the Lord. He had hidden 100 prophets in caves when Jezebel was killing them. Obadiah met Elijah. Elijah told him to tell Ahab that Elijah was here. Ahab came to Elijah and said, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Elijah replied, "I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and followed the Baals." Now Elijah made a bold challenge. He said to Ahab, "Gather all Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Ahab agreed. This was a showdown. It was God against Baal. It was truth against lies. It was life against death. Mount Carmel was a mountain overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It was a place where people could see clearly what would happen. When all the people gathered on Mount Carmel, Elijah stood before them. He said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people did not say a word. They were silent. They were afraid to commit. They had been worshiping Baal for years, but they knew deep down that Baal was not real. They were wavering. They were trying to serve both God and Baal. Elijah was calling them to make a decision. Then Elijah proposed a test. He said, "I am the only prophet of the Lord left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose 1 bull and cut it into pieces. Let them put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." All the people answered and said, "This is a good idea." The prophets of Baal went first. They took the bull and prepared it. They called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. They said, "O Baal, answer us." but there was no sound. No one answered. They danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to mock them. He said, "Shout louder. Surely Baal is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So the prophets shouted louder. They slashed themselves with swords and spears until blood flowed. This was their custom. They thought that shedding blood would get Baal's attention. They raved on until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no sound. No one answered. No one paid attention. Now it was Elijah's turn. He called all the people to come near to him. He repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. He built an altar in the name of the Lord. He dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood. He cut the bull into pieces and laid it on the wood. Then he did something dramatic. He said, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." They did this. He said, "Do it again." They did it again. He said, "Do it a 3rd time." They did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. Why did Elijah pour water on the offering? He wanted to make sure there was no trick. He wanted everyone to know that only God could send fire. Water and fire do not mix. If fire came down and consumed a water-soaked sacrifice, everyone would know it was a miracle from God. There would be no doubt. Then Elijah prayed. He said, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell. It burned up the sacrifice. It burned up the wood. It burned up the stones. It burned up the soil. It even licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell on their faces. They cried out, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Elijah then commanded the people to seize the prophets of Baal. They took them down to the Kishon Valley and killed them there. This was necessary to remove the false prophets from Israel. Then Elijah told Ahab to go eat and drink because rain was coming. Elijah went to the top of Mount Carmel and bowed down to the ground with his face between his knees. He told his servant to go and look toward the sea. The servant went and looked. He said, "There is nothing there." 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time, the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab to get his chariot and go down before the rain stops him." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and a heavy rain began to fall. The 3.5-year drought was over. Now let me explain what this story teaches about the supremacy of God. First, God is supreme over all false gods. The prophets of Baal cried out all day long. They danced. They cut themselves. They shouted. Nothing happened. Baal could not answer because Baal was not real. Baal was a statue. Baal had no power. Baal could not hear. Baal could not send fire. Baal could not send rain. Only the Lord God of Israel is real. Only He has power. Second, God is supreme over nature. Fire fell from heaven. This was not lightning. This was a direct act of God. The fire burned the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and the water. Nothing could resist God's fire. Then God sent rain. After 3.5 years of drought, God opened the heavens. The rain came down in a torrent. Ahab had to hurry down the mountain to escape the flood. God controls the weather. He sends drought. He sends rain. He is supreme over nature. Third, God is supreme over life and death. The prophets of Baal were executed. Their false teaching had led Israel astray. They had corrupted the worship of God. They had caused the people to sin. God's judgment fell on them. Their death was a demonstration that God alone is worthy of worship. Those who oppose God will not succeed. What else can you learn from this story? You can learn that God calls his people to make a decision. Elijah asked, "How long will you waver between two opinions?" This question is still relevant today. You cannot serve God and also serve other things. You cannot be neutral. You must choose. The people of Israel had been trying to serve both God and Baal. They thought they could have it both ways. Elijah told them that was impossible. If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. Make a choice. You can also learn that one person with God is a majority. Elijah was alone. There were 450 prophets of Baal. There were 400 prophets of Asherah. That is 850 false prophets against one man. But Elijah had God on his side, and God is enough. Do not be afraid to stand alone for what is right. God is with you. You can also learn that prayer is powerful. Elijah prayed a simple prayer. He did not shout. He did not cut himself. He did not dance. He simply asked God to show that he is God, and God answered. James tells us in the New Testament that Elijah was a human being just like us. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain for 3.5 years. He prayed again, and the heavens gave rain. Prayer works because God is supreme. A common exam question asks you to describe the contest on Mount Carmel and discuss its significance. Here is a sample answer. The contest on Mount Carmel was a challenge between Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal. Each side prepared a bull on an altar. The prophets of Baal called on Baal from morning to evening, but there was no answer. They danced and cut themselves, but nothing happened. Elijah then repaired the altar of the Lord, dug a trench, placed the bull on the wood, and poured water over everything 3 times. He prayed a simple prayer, asking God to show that he is God. Fire fell from heaven and consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and the water. The people declared, "The Lord, he is God." The significance of this contest is that it proved the supremacy of God over Baal. It demonstrated that only God can answer prayer and send fire from heaven. It also led to the execution of the false prophets and the end of the drought. Another exam question asks you to discuss the lessons of Mount Carmel for believers today. Here is your answer. The Mount Carmel contest teaches several lessons. First, believers must make a clear decision to follow God and not waver between two opinions. Second, one person with God is a majority. Believers should not be afraid to stand alone for the truth. Third, prayer is powerful. God answers the prayers of his servants. Fourth, God is supreme over all false gods and all forces of nature. Believers can trust God completely because he is supreme over everything. Let me summarize what you have learned. The supremacy of God means God is the highest in rank, power, and authority. The story of Elijah at Mount Carmel proves God's supremacy. The prophets of Baal could not get their God to answer. Elijah prayed, and fire fell from heaven. The people declared that the Lord is God. Then rain came, ending the drought. For your exam, always define supremacy first. Then describe the contest on Mount Carmel in detail. Then explain what the contest proves about God. Then write a short conclusion. You now understand the supremacy of God. Practice explaining this topic to someone else. See you in Topic 5.